Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. So let me tell you how this video came to be. Last week, I was scrolling through news stories, as I do, and one news story popped up about a new documentary series about Jared Fogle, and I was like, oh, I remember that dude. Jared from Subway, right? Always holding up the pants and being awkward in Subway commercials. And when I say Subway, I mean the fast food chain, not the mode of transportation, right? The sandwich place. And then I recalled that Jared had gotten into some trouble back in the day, like 2014, 2015 time, but I didn't remember a ton of details. I didn't remember a lot being said about him or what he had done in the mainstream media. It was kind of just like one day Jared was chomping down on turkey subs during Super Bowl ads, and the next day he was being hauled away by the FBI, and he was being charged with crimes against children, minors. But I never got the details, and because I honestly feel like the media wasn't really reporting on the details or even spending a lot of time talking about Jared and what he had done. Like, there was some news stories and stuff, but it wasn't like a constant thing. Like, if Jared had done what Jared had done in 2022 or 2023, like, that's all we'd be hearing about, right? So he kind of flew under the radar for a bit, and then he fell off the map. So when I'm reading this article and it's detailing some of the things that Jared Fogle did, I was shocked and disgusted and angry. So today we're going to talk about Jared Fogle, his humble everyman origin story, his rise to fame and fortune, and his public disgrace. And some of what you are going to hear in this video and the next video, because we're doing two videos about Jared, it's going to be shocking to you, just as it was to me. And as I was going through it, like right when I thought nothing could surprise me or shock me anymore, it did. There was more. There was more. But before we dive in today, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Jared Fogle is a creep. And there's tons of creeps just like him prowling the world around you right now. And a lot of them are using the internet to get close to you, to get close to your loved ones, to get close to your kids. And they're doing that to get a look at the private information you don't want anyone looking at. And not only do you have to worry about protecting yourself from the nefarious figures lurking in the dark crevices of the internet, like Jared Fogle and creeps like him, but you also have to worry about your own internet service provider selling your personal data without your consent. But at least I know that I can be safe on the internet with Surfshark VPN, and here's the best part, so can you. And all of your loved ones. Surfshark secures your data with industry-leading measures by using uncrackable encryption and the most secure VPN protocols. And when I say that there's people out there that want to, see your data and sell your data, I mean your sensitive information, like credit card numbers, banking numbers, but also like your private information, text messages, emails, those photos you have on that phone of yours that, you might want to keep just between you and one or two or three other people. That's none of my business. And not only that, but the stuff that makes you valuable as a consumer is located on your electronic devices. The things you're searching on the internet, what you're doing on social media, who you're talking to, the devices you're using to access the internet. Your internet service provider can see all of that, and they can sell it to the highest bidder so that these other companies that are buying your information can actually target you more accurately. You're being profiled. And honestly, I've always said this, I don't want anyone making money off of me, obviously, unless I'm getting a big cut of that. Your ISP, your internet service provider, can also slow down your internet connection if they think you're using too much data. Did you know that? And this used to happen to me a lot, and it was super disruptive to my workday because obviously I'm always online for work. I'm uploading videos, I'm downloading videos, I'm researching. Monday nights, Derek and I record Crime Weekly, our podcast, remotely, so I need the internet. So I have a lot of internet needs, but I also have kids who have a lot of internet needs. They like to game on their computers and their gaming systems, and they're on the TikTok, and that uses a ton of data, and my internet service provider was always slowing us down, and it sucked. But with Surfshark VPN, they encrypt your internet traffic so even your internet service provider cannot see what you're doing. Surfshark also provides IP and DNS leak protection so that nobody can find out where you're connecting from, and they maintain a strict no logs policy, which means they never store or save what you're doing on the internet, which a lot of ISP providers do because they want to sell your data. And all of that sounds complicated, and you might think you aren't tech savvy enough to even know where to start, and that's how I felt because I'm not tech savvy enough for anything really, but Surfshark is so easy to use. And if I can say that, you know that it's true. You just have to install it and run it, and then Surfshark will connect you to the best server that offers you the best speeds by default. And Surfshark VPN is jam-packed with features that go way beyond the basics. And these features allow you to not only protect yourself and your personal information, but there's a lot of other benefits, like having access to entertainment you might not otherwise have. I don't know if you know this about me. Probably some of you do because I talk about it all the time. I'm a huge fan of British television. I love it. I love it. And with Surfshark VPN, I don't have to wait for new seasons of my favorite BBC shows to come to the US. I can watch them as soon as they're playing over the pond by simply changing my IP address with Surfshark to look like I'm in the UK, right? I can watch anything in any country's massive content library. With Surfshark VPN, you can also unlock 15 of the largest Netflix country libraries, including the US and Japan, and Surfshark has now reached coverage in 100 countries, which is huge. And I believe that they're the first VPN to do that. Best of all, and my favorite feature, is that one Surfshark VPN subscription allows you to install and run Surfshark on an unlimited number of devices. That's big for me because I want to see my kids and my parents and my husband and my whole family protected, especially as my parents get older. I don't want to see them getting scammed by internet con artists. There's also apps for multiple platforms, including PlayStation and Xbox. So if you've got a gamer, especially a young gamer in your house that you want to keep safe, Surfshark VPN can help you do that. You really have nothing to lose. You should definitely try Surfshark VPN for yourself. If you find out it's not for you, they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, which gives you plenty of time to try Surfshark out risk-free. And right now, I've got a great deal for you. For a limited time, you can get 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. All you have to do is go to surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe. This special offer makes your subscription just $2.21 a month so you can browse securely on all of your devices. Once again, go to surfshark.deals/stephanieharlowe for 83% off a 2-year plan plus 3 extra months for free. Thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Okay, let's start off with a quick summary of who Jared Fogle is and what he did, like how this all started. I made a quick TikTok about Jared and the documentary that I watched, and I was surprised to see how many people had no idea who he even was. And I kind of marveled at the fact that it seems to me that Jared's crimes were severely downplayed by the media. The same people who propped him up and turned him into a trusted figure that would be allowed inside hundreds of middle school and elementary schools around the country. The media made this dude into a hero, a modern day god, a modern day fabled figure. And then because of this, I guess, illusion that he was trustworthy and that he was a good person. Because, how do you know if he's trustworthy? How does any of these media people know that he's trustworthy and a good person, right? They don't know, but he seemed unassuming. He seemed non-threatening. He seemed like just a normal, regular guy. And so everybody in the media propped him up and made him seem like literally the next best thing since sliced bread. So let's talk about who Jared Fogle was. He was a spokesperson for Subway, the fast food restaurants, and he appeared in Subway's marketing campaigns from 2000 to 2015, at which point he became the subject of an FBI investigation, which led to him being sentenced to 15 years in prison for possession and receipt of materials that were inappropriate and sexually driven featuring minor children. So from now on, we're going to refer to that stuff. And when I say that stuff, I mean videos, pictures, things like that. We're going to refer to that stuff as CSAM. CSAM stands for something. You can look it up if you want to. I don't want to say it because YouTube apparently has no problem with violence or Jake Paul, but they do have a problem with you shining a light on inappropriate things happening to minors. So I don't want this video to get suppressed. So we're gonna call the material that Jared got in trouble for possessing and receiving CSAM, okay? And that's how we're going to talk about it from now on. So this actually is terrible, right? What he was actually charged with is terrible. He was also charged with sexual contact with minors, things like that. So we're going to talk about that because This is just the tip of the iceberg. The headline I saw briefly when he was initially going through the court system, right? That was the headline, that Jared had maybe some pictures and some videos and some inappropriate materials and things like that. That's what we kind of heard in the news. But what Jared Fogle and his associates did to children, I never heard about all of that. What they actually did, like the depths of their depravity. Honestly, this video should be titled that, The Depths of Jared Fogle's Depravity. I never heard about all of that. I never heard how blatant Jared Fogle was, how his ego had grown so large that he believed he could do these things and be obvious about them and like brag about them, and no one would find out, or at least he wouldn't get in trouble. I have come to realize that Jared Fogle, Jared from Subway, Jared the Subway guy, is the most celebrated pedophile the world has ever known. I mean, I'm sure there's other prominent people right now who are doing similar things and who have not yet been caught. But at this point, yes, for years, society put this sick man, Jared, on a pedestal, and because he was a public figure, it gave people the illusion that he could be trusted with their most vulnerable assets, children. And I don't know anyone who's been more celebrated, more propped up, more featured in pop culture and in, modern society than Jared Fogle. And knowing what he was doing behind the scenes while everyone was like clapping him on the back and giving him high fives and saying, Jared, hold up your pants. He was doing all this stuff behind the scenes. It's bananas. So as always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning of this story takes us to Indianapolis, Indiana, where Jared Fogle was born on August 23rd, 1977, to his parents, Norman Fogle, who was a doctor, and Adrian Fogle, who was a teacher. And it seemed like Jared Fogle had a normal middle American upbringing with a large and supportive family, something that the judge in his case would note so many years later as roughly a dozen family members crowded into the courtroom to offer Jared their support, which is a whole nother can of worms, right? It blows my mind because if someone I was related to did what Jared did, they're dead to me. I don't care who you are. I don't care how close we are. I don't care if you're my twin sister. You are dead to me if you did the things that Jared Fogle did. So it's weird. Clearly, he had a supportive family, but I wonder also if maybe he had a family who enabled his bad behavior, considering showing up to court to support him after what he did illustrates to me that they're kind of willing to just look the other way for any reason. Now, according to Jared Fogle, he started putting on weight very young. He was in the 3rd or 4th grade. And because of that, he became, kind of withdrawn, introverted, like a nerdy, lonely kid who sat by himself at lunch and didn't have any friends. And listen, this documentary, as well as Jared himself, they're going to try to make you feel bad about that, right? They're going to try to shine a light on, oh, poor Jared, poor overweight Jared, no friends, nobody wanted to be with him. In fact, I think in the documentary, one of the girls who was being interviewed, who went to school with Jared, said something like, oh, sitting with Jared at lunch, that would be social suicide. We would never do that. Like, okay, school sucked. High school sucked. All right. It sucked for me too. Lunchtime was the worst time because I didn't have a lot of friends. I was introverted. I was kind of weird and I didn't like people that much. And so every day at lunch, it was like a struggle. Like, where am I going to sit? Am I going to sit alone or am I going to try to sit next to people? Like, I'm just going to take my lunch and go outside and eat alone. Okay. Like, I get it, man. It's hard. Kids are mean. We get it. But like, why is that relevant? Why is it relevant? We're going to talk about that later because Jared's got all sorts of excuses for why he became like the biggest piece of shit ever to walk this earth. I mean, that's hyperbolic. Obviously, he's not the biggest piece of shit to walk the face of this earth. But while we're in this video and we're talking about this case, he is. So Jared goes on to say the more weight he gained, the more socially awkward he felt, the more he pulled himself away from others, which caused him to feel more isolated and more lonely, which caused him to eat more because he was eating his emotions, which just continued on this horrible cycle until Jared felt that he only had one friend. He only had one friend in the world. Food. Jared not only developed an intimate relationship with fast food, burgers, fries, pizza, hot dogs, the whole nine, but he also lived a very sedentary life. He didn't go outside and play sports or run around with the neighborhood kids. He stayed inside. He watched TV. He played video games. He drank soda and ate pizza bagels. And by the time he graduated high school and started college, Jared Fogle weighed 425 pounds. And obviously, as it does, this additional weight began to cause noticeable health problems. He had sleep apnea. He was having fluid building up in his legs and his limbs, and just the general stuff that comes along with being, very overweight and also having a sedentary lifestyle and not having the best nutritional diet. So while attending classes at Indiana University, Jared found that everything was a struggle for him suddenly. Like, even to just walk across campus to his classes was almost impossible. He chose his courses, like the classes he took in college, based on how far the classrooms were from his dorm, or how big the chairs in each classroom were, and if he would be able to fit into them. He could no longer fly in an airplane. He couldn't ride a roller coaster, and his quality of life suffered greatly. When he gave those two examples of ways that his quality of life suffered, though, I was almost like, dude, I don't want to ride in planes or on roller coasters because both of those things terrify me, like, beyond belief. So, but yeah. I mean, he couldn't do the things he wanted to do, basically. And in one of his early interviews, Jared Fogle said, quote, "As my weight went up, there was a decrease in my life and life functions. I used to bowl, play tennis. When you're 425 pounds, it's tough to bowl or find tennis shoes. When you're that big, you're ignored. People don't know how to deal with you." End quote. And every time Jared went home to Indianapolis to visit his parents, he regretted it because his father, who was a doctor, a family physician, would kind of always get on Jared to lose weight. Because obviously Norman Fogle was concerned about his son's health. He's a doctor. He's seeing his son gain more and more weight. And he was never a dick about it, right? But he was just like kind of naggy about it. Like, every time he saw Jared, he was like, you really got to do something. Like, you got to lose a few pounds. This isn't good for you. You're too young for this. Because at this point, Jared's like 21 years old. And Jared would later say, quote, "I hated going home. I didn't want to eat healthy no matter how much pleading he would do." End quote. But by the spring of 1998, Jared recognized that his weight was creating even more problems for him, and it had become impossible to do anything. He'd been hospitalized the previous December. He was wearing a size XXXXXXL shirt. And at that time, he was just 22 years old and a business and marketing major. He had his whole life ahead of him. This was his 20s. He should have been doing things. He should have had a girlfriend. He should have been going on spring break to Florida with his friends. But that spring break of that year, he didn't want to go home and be nagged about his weight anymore. So Jared remained at his off-campus apartment, which was located at the intersection of Woodlawn and Atwater Avenues, and just 10 steps away from Jared's front door was a Subway. Now, the Subway franchise began in 1965 as one submarine shop in Bridgeport, Connecticut called Pete's Super Submarines. But by 1974, founders Fred DeLuca and Dr. Peter Buck owned and operated 16 sandwich shops. But to take it even further and reach their goal of 32 restaurants, the pair decided to begin franchising, launching the Subway brand into a period of incredible growth and popularity. Today, Subway serves customizable sandwiches to millions of guests a day across more than 100 countries in more than 37,000 locations. Now, the premise for Subway is and was pretty simple. You can go in and pick your bread, pick your meat, pick your toppings, and make your sandwich exactly the way you want it with great customer service. That was the premise, at least. And in March of 2012, Subway launched their Live Fresh, Eat Fresh campaign. And this was with the goal to show that fast food didn't have to be bad for you and could be included in part of a healthy, active lifestyle. Now, part of this initiative would be a new marketing campaign with TV and print ads highlighting Subway's range of 9 healthy sandwiches, all of which were said to contain fewer than 5 grams of fat, and they were supposed to be under 370 calories each. So Jared Fogle was a big Subway fan, mainly because the Bloomington, Indiana location was so close to his apartment, but he was eating large portions and not super healthy sandwiches, right? He was eating steak subs smothered in cheese with all the toppings, potato chips, cookies, lots of soda. So during spring break of 1998, Jared stayed home. He didn't go home. He was there by himself, feeling sorry for himself, and he left his apartment one mild spring day and walked the 10 steps to Subway. But instead of ordering his usual, he decided that it was time for a change. Jared remembers this moment in many following interviews, and he said, quote, "I was really feeling low, just feeling bad about myself across the board. And I was standing there at the Subway sandwich shop reading a sign advertising their 7 sandwiches with 6 grams of fat menu. It just sort of dawned on me. I liked Subway. Maybe this could be a way I could lose weight," end quote. And I know that there's a lot of people in my audience who are watching right now who are super compassionate, like the majority of you, honestly. I got to give you credit for that. I will say the community we've built here is incredibly compassionate, incredibly empathetic, incredibly giving of their feelings and their emotions to others who are less fortunate, who are going through struggles. And there's going to be points where you might find yourself feeling bad for Jared. I know you will, because I did too, because I fell into that trap. I fell into that trap. There's going to be times where you're like, oh, this guy, poor guy, like that sounds horrible. It does, whatever, it does sound horrible. Don't you feel bad for him. Don't you feel bad for this guy. Don't do it. Trust me, because people can go through hard stuff and, have hard lives and stuff can suck for them, and we can recognize that. But then they go on to do things that completely make it impossible to feel any empathy towards them ever. And I don't feel any empathy towards him, honestly. He got off way too easy, if you ask me. So Jared was like, I got to make a change. This sucks. I don't like it anymore. And he decided to drastically alter his diet. And he went to a diet that consisted of eating only Subway sandwiches. And he was going to do that to see if he could lose some weight. And he did. He did, right? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why he lost weight, like legitimately and honestly. So for breakfast, this was his diet. For breakfast, Jared would have black coffee. For lunch, he would have a 6-inch turkey sandwich or a turkey sub, a bag of baked Lay's, and a Diet Coke. And for dinner, he would eat a foot-long Veggie Delight sandwich and then have another Diet Coke. He would never put cheese or dressing or mayo on these sandwiches. Therefore, at that point, Jared was consuming less than 10 grams of fat a day and only about 1,000 calories. And so obviously, he was going to lose weight, no matter what he was eating, honestly. If he was eating anything that was 1,000 calories or under a day, he was going to lose weight because he was putting himself into a very, very, very large calorie deficit, especially considering his weight, because even a full-grown man that's not 425 pounds still needs way more than 1,000 calories a day. And so his body basically went into shock and was like, what's happening? Where's all the food you were giving us? So anybody or anytime you go into a large calorie deficit like that, you're going to lose weight. So was it the subs? No. What was it? The calorie deficit. Why did people gleam onto it so quickly? Because people like to be told what to do to lose weight. People want to have this quick fix. They want to have this formula, this formulaic diet that they can follow. Like, oh, this person did this, exactly this, so I'm going to do exactly this and I'm going to have the same results. And that's not true because everybody's body is different. Everybody's health is different, metabolism, things like that. So obviously it's not true. Any calorie deficit will put you into a position where you're burning fat and losing weight, but that's not necessarily healthy. The healthiest thing to do is eat a well-balanced nutritional diet and just be active, right? That's the best way to do it. But you wouldn't lose weight if you were doing that as fast as Jared lost weight, because within 2 months of starting this diet, Jared had dropped 95 pounds, like an entire person, and he decided to keep pushing and keep going, and he was consulting with the doctor on a monthly basis. He was taking a multivitamin, and as soon as he had taken off some of the weight, he was able to start walking, and so every single day he walked 1.5 miles. Within a year, Jared Fogle had lost 245 pounds, and he'd gone from a 60-inch waist to to a size 34 waist, something that he would talk about and go on and on and on about and spend years illustrating as he traveled from city to city with his large pants in tow, holding them up to show everyone just how drastic the weight loss had been.
So Jared, you've got your old fat pants, haven't you? Let's have a look at them.
I do. These are way more famous than I am, Piers. Actually, if I can't make an event, I send the pants. But this is what I used to wear.
Wow, look at
this
that.
Is the old. This was a 60-inch waist. Now these are the relaxed fit though, which is very important to have.
All right, Chris.
And just to give you a little bit of an idea of the old me, of course. This is the old pair of pants that I used to wear.
Wow.
When I was,
what size are those?
These are a 60-inch, but they're the relaxed fit. 60
Yeah.
inch as opposed
So
to
it's really
classic.
like a 60.
And the weight loss was dramatic, so much so that in the spring of 1999, when another student named Ryan Coleman, who was the student reporter for the Indiana Daily Student — I said student like 3 times, but basically Ryan Coleman is the reporter for the student newspaper — he passed Jared on campus. They were like both walking, and he walked past Jared, and he was like, holy shit, is that Jared Fogle? He didn't even recognize him because of the amount of weight that Jared had lost. And it wasn't like Ryan just knew Jared in passing. He'd been Jared's friend, and they'd shared a dorm room together freshman year. So yeah, he was well aware of what this dude looked like. And Ryan Coleman was stunned by Jared's transformation. So he interviewed his old friend for the paper, and the article that was published in November of 1999 was titled From Thick to Thin. And it ended with Jared proclaiming, quote, "Subway helped save my life and start over. I can't ever repay that." End quote. Now, this article got picked up by a bigger mainstream publication, Men's Health magazine, and obviously that helped it eventually reach Subway when their ad agency in Chicago caught wind of this average Joe who was literally crediting Subway with helping to save his life. And what better ad campaign is that? That's like a ready-to-go ad campaign. It's a ready-to-go marketing genius campaign that this company, Subway's marketing company, didn't even have to come up with themselves. All they had to do was find Jared. So the marketing company got in touch with Jared and asked him if he wanted to tell his story as a Subway spokesperson. And hence, Jared, the Subway guy, was born. And if he hadn't messed up so royally, he would have had a great life, man. He would have had a lot of money. He would have had a lot of prestige. He would have had a lot of publicity for a long time. He may have even gotten to go on like some of those MTV reality shows like The Surreal Life or something. I think he was on The Biggest Loser, actually. He would have been right up there with Jake from State Farm had he not messed up. Hindsight, man. The first commercial featuring Jared debuted on January 1st, 2000, and the 30-second spot had been filmed in Pasadena, California, and as soon as we all saw Jared, I guess everyone fell in love. Not me. I do want to go on the record here, and I know that people say this, and they're like, I always felt like he was weird, and I always felt there was something wrong with him. I mean it, okay? He always creeped me out. There was something about his smile and his eyes together that struck me as oddly reptilian, cold, like predatory, whatever, that. Yeah, I didn't like him. I always made fun of him, I always made fun of him because he was so corny in the commercials. But Jared, for some reason, hit a chord with the American public. He became popular because he was relatable. He was just a normal guy who truly loved and believed in the product he was pushing, and there is power in that. But you can see in these commercials, Jared's no actor. This guy's he's not an actor. He's stiff, he's awkward, he doesn't seem to know what to do with his face or his hands half the time. Like, it's just super forced. When he's in these commercials with like these athletes and these like, somewhat famous people, and they're like, oh, Jared, and he's like, ho, ho, ho. Like, it's just so freaking cringe and awkward.
And how's Jared these days? He's looking better than ever.
But whatever Jared was doing, it worked for Subway, who saw their sales increase by 18% that year and an additional 16% the following year.
Here is Jared Fogle. You may have seen him on the news or a talk show. He was inspired by Subway's great-tasting sandwiches. Jared believes in an active lifestyle, including lots of walking. At the heart of Jared's routine are Subway sandwiches.
Hey, Jared.
Hey, guys.
At Subway, you can choose from 7 sandwiches with 6 grams of fat or less, and they all taste great. Food for thought. Subway, it's the way a sandwich should be.
In no time, Jared's face and his size 60 relaxed fit jeans were staring down at customers from the windows of 14,000 Subway shops nationwide. And there was also a sudden rush on turkey subs. Ray Burrows, owner of 6 Subways in the Baltimore area, he saw his sales increase by 50%, and he said there was such a high demand for turkey subs that the entire company, Subway, was seeing a nationwide turkey shortage. Now, the day his first commercial aired, Jared himself went to his usual Subway stop to order a turkey sub, only to be told they were sold out. And he was probably like, the audacity. The audacity. That's sometimes how I feel when I like advertise a product like Native's Cherry Vanilla Macaron, the scent, and how much I loved it. And then I talked about it in one of my videos, and then I went to order some and they were all sold out. It's kind of how I felt at that point. Like, imagine being Jared Fogle and you've made the turkey sub like nationally famous, and you go in to order a turkey sub and they don't got one for you. What? Becoming the face of Subway was not just a good thing for the company, it changed Jared Fogle's life. After graduating from college, Jared had actually been offered a really good, well-paying job to work as a pricing analyst for an airline company. But I don't think he ever worked one damn day at that job, because he quickly realized the long-term potential he had with Subway was far greater. And by July of 2001, Jared Fogle was acting full-time as a Subway spokesperson. And he became something of an overnight celebrity. He was interviewed by Oprah, Katie Couric, Matt Lauer. He traveled the country, starting with a tour of more than 126 U.S. cities and towns, visiting Subway locations, meeting customers, shaking the hands of employees, and making sure to hold those damn big pants up for the reporters and camera people who crowded in to see Jared, the Subway guy, in the flesh. You wouldn't believe the crowds this guy brought in. And he was always holding up those damn pants, man. And maybe we should have seen it then. Maybe we should have seen the signs. A man that travels around the country clutching onto his pants and telling everyone about his pants, it's not a man I would trust. It wouldn't be long until Jared was also traveling to the UK and Australia with Subway, and he inspired others to do what he had done, make a change in their diet and lifestyle and lose weight. And before you knew it, there were tons of other people on our television screens standing next to a smiling Jared Fogle, holding up their own pair of large pants. I'm so glad that trend ended. I'm so glad. Jared began appearing in Subway ads next to actual talented people like Olympic swimmer Michael Phelps. I don't care what you want to say about Michael Phelps. He could swim, okay? Jared stood up as the Grand Marshal at a Subway-sponsored NASCAR race. He carried the 2002 Olympic torch through Indiana on its way to Salt Lake City. And he did the coin toss at the 2003 Fiesta Bowl. Everywhere Jared would go, he was being recognized, stopped in the street, asked for autographs. And almost overnight, Jared from Subway was a part of pop culture. He was the object of an SNL skit. I think Jimmy Fallon did it, if I remember correctly. He was mentioned in an episode of Friends. He was talked about in an episode of South Park. That's how you know you really made it. When you're in South Park, you're famous or infamous. Infamous in his case. But it wasn't just his professional life that was improving. It was his personal life as well, because Jared from Subway finally got a shot at love, and he began dating his first girlfriend ever. Yeah, he was like 22 years old. He never had a girlfriend. And his first girlfriend ever was 22-year-old Elizabeth Christie, who was also an Indiana University graduate and also a nursing student. And by November of 2000, she was engaged to rising star Jared Fogle, who had apparently gone from zero to hero. One newspaper article from that time wrote that Jared was shy in talking about how much Subway was paying him to be their frontman. So instead of giving a dollar amount, Jared joked that he didn't have to pay for any sandwiches. But I can tell you that by 2013, Jared had appeared in roughly 300 commercials for Subway, and he was worth over $15 million. And he thought an awful lot of himself as well. Within the first year of being the Subway guy and traveling the country as the Subway guy, Jared was talking about writing a book and becoming a motivational speaker, both of which he would go on to do, by the way. He wrote a book, and he also became a motivational speaker with his motivation aimed at children. And listen, I don't want to talk down about anybody who takes it upon themselves to make a change in their life, and they make sacrifices and they do things that are hard in order to achieve that change. I never do. But I also would like to say it's annoying how every single person who has achieved something personally feels like they now can write a book about it and become a motivational speaker, because they feel like, once again, their formula, what worked for them, can be copy and pasted and, assembly lined into working for everybody. I would like to see something a little bit more legitimate before you become a motivational speaker for children in middle schools. But listen, I'm just being shady right now because I cannot stand this guy. If you scroll through old newspapers from the years 2000, 2001, 2002, which is actually something I like to do in my free time, I like to just scroll through old newspapers. But if you did that and you were looking for Jared Fogle, there's plenty of articles talking about Jared, his weight loss success, and the way he inspired others to also make health their priority. But it seemed like 2003 was the year when the tone of these interviews with Jared shifted slightly. If you were following Jared's career as it was happening, this shift may have even been too subtle to even notice, but reading all of these articles over the space of one afternoon, which is what I did, that made it all the more obvious. In 2003 and 2004, it seemed like Jared's focus was shifting towards his work with children, and it honestly felt like that was all Jared wanted to talk about, right? The interviewer would ask him questions about his weight loss journey, his current diet, like how did this all start? And apparently he was sick of talking about that because he would find a way to bring the conversation back to the kids, no matter what. He would find any segue to go back to talking about kids. And Jared would express how grateful he was, how happy he felt that his influence and his celebrity had given him the opportunity to really get close to all of these kids and make a difference in their lives. Okay, you don't believe me that he always wanted to talk about kids and he was saying creepy ass shit like this? That should have been a red flag, then. But I mean, hindsight, once again, hindsight's 20/20. I'm not blaming anybody who interviewed him during those times. I'm not blaming anybody who heard him talk about kids constantly and didn't think oh, this guy's creepy and probably is into kids, because, you just think he's a good guy and he cares about people and he cares about their health and he wants to make sure that kids are healthy and he gets them when they're young. Oh, see, that sounds bad too. But that's what Jared said. He said, I want to target these kids when they're young and still pliable enough to make life changes instead of falling into old habits or falling into habits that become old habits. So if you don't believe me that he was constantly talking about kids, let me illustrate this for you really quickly. So you don't think I'm being dramatic or hyperbolic, which I do admit. I sometimes have a tendency to do both of those things. I'll say it out loud. I don't care. I can be dramatic and I can over-exaggerate, but I'm not doing it in this situation. So in this June 2004 Miami Herald article titled, "He's Slim and Trim, but Wary of Extra Pounds," Jared is asked, what's the best thing about being Jared Fogle? He responded, quote, "For me, I think it's truly getting to inspire other people these days, especially the kids. I really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and hopefully they do too." End quote. In this November 2004 Indianapolis Star article, there's a big-ass picture of Jared leading a group of children like some pasty-ass, creepy-ass Pied Piper. And the caption says, "Leader of the pack, Subway spokesperson Jared Fogle led Amy Beverland Elementary School students on a walk Monday as part of the school's Healthy Kids Initiative." End quote. This is so gross. So gross. Looking at Jared amongst this crowd of children, leading them by the hand, and the others gazing up at him with adoration and hero worship. It's so gross. The article elaborates, saying, quote, "When he stepped out on stage, they roared with applause. And when he asked for volunteers, just about every hand shot up. And when Jared Fogle led them for a lap around the school's walking track outside, they jockeyed for position to be near him." End quote. Ew. Ew. Okay? Ew. Just, yeah, he used his celebrity and he used his notoriety and the fact that he was on TV and he was perceived as this good guy to get close to children. And they they worshipped him because he was somebody they saw on their TVs. Like, that's really the epitome of it. Let me continue reading this article because hindsight is 2020, like I said, but it's also terrifying. Quote, Fogel got a dose of hero worship Monday, something he says happens every time he visits school children. He has pushed his schedule for more visits to elementary schools so he can deliver his message of eating right and staying fit to those who most need it. End quote. He pushed his schedule to make sure that he has ample time to spend with children. What a guy. What a sweet, kind, selfless person. So moving on to this article from October of 2004 in the Herald Sun, titled Subway Guy to Share Success Tale at State Fair. It says that since the beginning of 2003, the beginning of the 2003 school year, Jared has visited schools around the country on the Jared School Tour, where he's talked to over 32,000 kids about making healthy choices. And it just goes on and on like this, article after article, talking about what school Jared, the Subway Guy, was visiting that week or that day, where he was going next, and Jared constantly saying the quiet part out loud. I really want to get at children early. I want to be able to influence them early while they're still open to new experiences, while they're still open to basically allowing me to manipulate them. Okay. In 2004, Jared Fogle established the Jared Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that claimed to provide education about childhood obesity. Now, when the foundation was established, Jared was spending 200 days a year on the road visiting different schools and community organizations, giving speeches about healthy eating and lifestyle choices, and Subway jumped on this bandwagon and filmed a handful of new commercials featuring Jared appearing with young children. Yep, that's what happened. In November of 2004, Jared said that he targets his message to 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders because that was the age that he was when he began to gain weight. And he said, quote, it really empowers kids to make them aware of their decisions they may not even have been aware of. Kids feel like they have no control over their own lives, what they snack on, their choices at lunchtime, end quote. Which is true, right? Children don't feel as if they have control over their own lives. Oftentimes they don't. And that is something that a pedophile and a groomer like Jared Fogle would not only recognize and understand, but something he would capitalize on. It is something he did capitalize on. Using his celebrity, he set up the Jared Foundation, which gave a child predator a legitimate reason to be close to children whenever he wanted. And not only that, right? He was invited in. He was treated like a king. He was their hero. These kids worshiped him. They looked up to him. So the hard work of grooming these kids, training them to trust him, that had already been done for Jared by ad campaigns and adults, parents and teachers who were so starry-eyed by the idea of a person who'd been on television that they didn't even ever question his motives. And once again, I'm not trying to judge people. It was, I guess, a different time. It wasn't that long ago, but it was a different time. And I'm just generally suspicious, right? I'm suspicious of everybody when it comes to my kids. So I personally wouldn't be like, oh yeah, come on in to this guy who I don't even know and allow him to come into a school and be around children. I personally wouldn't do that, but I do remember when I was in elementary school and even grade school and stuff, they'd always bring in speakers and we'd always be excited because they were cool people like firemen or the Dare guy. The Dare guy was amazing. And what would happen if the Dare guy was a predator? How would the school know? Once again, hindsight. But hindsight is valuable because it teaches us places we can be more careful in our lives today. So let's keep talking about the Jared Foundation because Jared Fogle promised to raise $2 million with this foundation. And he was going to give that $2 million to schools to help them fight childhood obesity. But much like Jared himself, the foundation was a big fraud, an empty shell, an entity that had nothing of substance to it, that pretended to want to help others, but in the end was just a big selfish dickhead. According to CNN, between 2008 and 2013, the foundation raised, I believe, over $700,000. Yet tax documents reveal that during that time, it only donated $145,000, less than a quarter of its stated mission, and obviously far less than what it actually brought in, what it raised, right? Because this wasn't like the foundation was like working for this money. It was just taking donations from people who were like, oh, Jared's good. His foundation's good. It's a good cause. Let me donate money. And it looks like a lot of the foundation's raised money actually went to a man named Russell Taylor. And Russell Taylor was hired by Jared to be the foundation's director in 2009. Now, Russell Taylor is one of Jared's cohorts, one of his band of merry psychopaths. Russell Taylor and Jared had actually met while Taylor was the youth marketing director for the American Heart Association in Indianapolis. The American Heart Association worked a ton with Jared Fogle, and Russell Taylor was the basically the director of like youth programs. And I guess Russell Taylor and Jared had hit it off. Russell had written a speech for Jared once. They reportedly had a good working relationship. They became friends. And then Jared would make Russell Taylor his foundation director. But Russell wasn't just Jared's foundation director and buddy. He was also his accomplice. And it was Russell Taylor who would first provide Jared with CSAM in March of 2011. Now, these were images that Taylor delivered to Jared via text messages and thumb drives, and some of these images showed children as young as 6. As the Indy Star put it, quote, Fogle and Taylor had 2 things in common: highly sexualized lifestyles and careers that brought them into regular contact with children, end quote. Jesus. Like, to hear it said out loud like that, whew, disturbing. So, like I said, Russell Taylor was working as the youth program manager for the American Heart Association, and he met Jared while the subway guy was giving a presentation at a local elementary school, which Russell Taylor was also present for with the American Heart Association. And after this presentation, the 2 men had dinner and bonded over their shared interests, which apparently at that time was sex and booze and just living like, college students eternally, and later would be young children would be their shared interests. Now, Russell Taylor claims that the day after this dinner was the first time he became aware of Jared's interest in young children when the subway spokesman was getting ready to address a group of children that next day, and he told Russell an inappropriate knock-knock joke that involved having sex with children. I can't even imagine what this knock-knock joke would have been. I can't imagine why Jared Fogle would feel comfortable enough with Russell Taylor after just knowing him for one day to say it, right? Which makes me think that maybe they were talking about their interest in children during their first dinner together. And Taylor claims they weren't. He never mentioned anything about liking children or being into children or underage kids or minors or anything like that. And he also claimed that this knock-knock joke made him feel very uncomfortable. But he was like, well, is this guy kidding? Like, he's a famous guy. He can't be like a creep like this. So he just left it off. But as the 2 hung out more, they became closer. And Jared basically just brought Russell into his lifestyle. He flew himself and Russell first class to New England to watch the Colts-Patriot playoff game. After that, they went to a strip club where they made themselves at home in the champagne room. And on that night, Russell Taylor claims that Jared looked at him and told him, hey, if you can get this stripper who's with us in the champagne room to come back to our shared luxury hotel room, I'll pay you like a finder's fee. And this is something that Jared does a lot, these finder fees things. He just brings all these bunch of people into like his weird, sick plots and thinks that nobody's ever going to turn him in. Anyway, so Russell Taylor actually got this woman to come back with him to the hotel room, and he said that both he and Jared had sex with her. Oh my God. Oh my God. Can you imagine Jared, the subway guy, over you in bed? Nope. Wipe my brain of that image. Russell Taylor would later tell a psychologist, quote, that began our 12-year run, end quote. So after Russell Taylor took over the Jared Foundation in 2009, the bond between him and Jared became tighter as they traveled even more together, visiting schools and hanging out with kids during the day, and at night going to bars and finding women who knew who Jared was so that they could have sex with them. Taylor said, quote, we were always aware of the age of consent in Indiana. It's 16, end quote. Is that true? That can't be true. That can't be true. I mean, it's true. All right, so I looked it up. It does say the age of consent is 16 in Indiana, and basically they say, like, in Indiana they allow those who are 16 and up to make their own decisions about sexual relationships. I mean, pedo's paradise over in Indiana, am I right? I'm not going to go there. That's all I'm saying. I'm not going to go there. 16? Come on, man. 16. Like, literally, it says here, like, yes, a 16-year-old can have a sexual relationship with a 45-year-old man and nobody's going to blink an eye in Indiana. What kind of sicko made that law? Ridiculous. Anyways, Russell Taylor said that he and Jared would drink like fishes on Jared's dime. And Russell said, quote, he'd pay more for wine in a year than he paid me to work for him, end quote. Okay, dude. Were you really doing any work? What a whiny brat, right? Like, were you really doing any work, Russell Taylor? Because as we've discussed, the foundation was a fraud, and it sounds like you were having fun with Jared, traveling around, getting to like hang out with middle school kids while still making $40,000 a year from a foundation that wasn't even real. And then at night going to strip clubs and basically drinking and eating on your boss's dime. Like, what are you complaining about, you freak? Anyways, Russell Taylor said that it was around 2008 when he noticed Jared becoming more interested in sex with minors, and he seemed to be more actively pursuing it, like going from it being just something that they talked about to something that Jared was like, how can we make this happen? But for some reason, Taylor still didn't think much of it. Russell Taylor didn't think much of that because he said he never saw Jared acting on it. Okay. Now, at some point during these years of fun and frolicking with Jared Fogle, Russell Taylor met a woman online named Angela. They were talking online, they developed a relationship, and eventually Angela and Russell got married, and she and her two young daughters, Hannah and Christian, moved in with Russell Taylor to a nice house located at 1304 Salem Creek Boulevard in Indianapolis. Now, something that you need to know about this home is, yes, Russell Taylor was living in it with his family, but the house was owned by Jared Fogle. Now, the girls, Angela's daughters, Hannah and Christian, they sort of tell a story of their lives and how their lives changed when Russell Taylor became a part of them, and how their mother, Angela, changed. So Angela had previously been allegedly a very traditional, conservative woman who didn't drink or, didn't party. She went to church every week, and she was strict with her daughters. But when Russell and Angela got married and they all started living together, Angela kind of did a complete 180. All of a sudden, she was drinking. She was partying. She was like swinging with her husband, Russell Taylor. She was like going to sex parties. And she and Russell sort of began to encourage Hannah and Christian and their friends, their young friends, to do the same. Now, keep in mind, at this time, Hannah and Christian were 10 and 13. When they first met Russell Taylor and he first came into their lives, they were 10 and 13, and they were 12 and 15 when Russell and Angela were basically buying them alcohol, letting them drink alcohol, letting them smoke weed, letting them have parties in the house, and even encouraging the girls and their friends to do other things alone and together, which we'll talk about in a bit, what they were encouraging these very young children to do. But as the head of the Jared Foundation, Russell Taylor was bringing in a pretty nice salary, $40K plus. Jared owned his house, so I believe Jared was paying for it. And the whole family kind of knew that they owed their lifestyle to Jared Fogle, who Russell was always hanging out with and traveling with because they were besties. Russell was always texting Jared or emailing him or going on trips to Vegas, trips to Thailand. But Hannah and Christian didn't actually meet Jared in person until they had dinner together one night, at which point they said they found him to be a quiet and reserved man, a man who watched and listened more than he talked and interacted, like a predator. That would change as time went on and as they spent more time with Jared. And they said he would begin to open up more and they'd feel more comfortable together. And at first, everything was great. It was gravy. Hannah and Christian said that it made them feel good and cool to be hanging out with Jared, going to his house for dinner, traveling with him. They could tell their friends what they were doing, and everyone thought it was really glamorous. Like they had this kind of celebrity lifestyle just from being in proximity to Jared Fogle. That was until their stepfather, Russell, convinced them to bring one of their friends to dinner with Jared because Russell thought that Jared would really like this young girl who was only 15 years old at the time. And Russell told Hannah and Christian this. He was like, oh, I want you to bring your friend, let's call her Sophia, because I think Jared would really like her. And I don't know if the girls just thought like maybe he would like to talk to her, like maybe he was interested, maybe she was like a gymnast and he was interested in gymnastics. I don't know, but those were the words that Russell Taylor used, because even at this point, and for some time before and after that, he's grooming these two young girls to make them think that it's completely normal and okay for a grown man to have any interest at all in a 15-year-old girl. Okay, like never should that happen. Never should anybody be like, oh yeah, this 45-year-old man is really interested in this 15-year-old girl for any reason. Like, let's bring her to dinner with him. So after the dinner, Russell would constantly talk to Hannah and Christian about how Jared was interested sexually in their friend and how he thought that their friend was attractive and sexy. And he and Jared would text each other about this girl's looks, about like what they would do if they were having sex with her, how she would be in bed, etc. A 15-year-old girl. Okay? And Hannah and Christian said that at this point, they were sort of desensitized to it. They'd been groomed already by Russell Taylor. They'd already been kind of made to believe that being overtly sexual with adult men and even adult women, we're going to get into that, was normal and okay. So they thought, Jared and Russell were just being perverted guys. No harm, no foul. Like your perverted uncle that everyone knows, you stay away from him and he makes weird comments and you're just like, that's just Uncle Joey again being weird. But then Hannah mentioned these comments and these conversations to her friend, and her friend was shocked and disturbed, and her friend was like hurt, and her friend was like, why would they be talking about me like that? At which point Hannah was like, oh, this isn't okay. This isn't appropriate. This is weird. And like I said, the reason Hannah and Christian didn't think anything of it until they got this outside perspective was because they were being groomed and conditioned, and they had no idea that this was wrong because it's what they were dealing with every day, which is incredibly sad. So Russell Taylor and his wife Angela, Hannah and Christian's mother, would soon be arrested and charged with producing and possessing CSAM, but we'll talk about that soon. For now, let's go back to Jared Fogle, who's going to end up giving a woman named Rochelle Herman a master class in grooming tactics. Rochelle Herman was a radio host in Sarasota, Florida, and in the fall of 2006, she got a call from the American Heart Association asking if she would interview Jared Fogle, the subway guy, on her show. She agreed, and he showed up at the studio half an hour late, of course, because he's a star. And Rochelle said, whatever, Jared was fine at that time. He was friendly, cordial during the interview, but he did have an ego. And after the interview, Rochelle said that Jared began to flirt with her. He was telling her that she was pretty and he'd like to get to know her better and sort of getting a little handsy when they were taking pictures and stuff like that. So as part of their interview, Rochelle and Jared were also scheduled to give a talk at a local middle school, which would be recorded by a cameraman. So the cameraman's getting the sound ready. They're already mic'd up. Rochelle and Jared are sitting on the stage of this middle school auditorium. The cameraman's getting them framed up. And as they're waiting for the cameraman to get the framing right, Jared's flirting with Rochelle more. And he's like, oh, can I hold your hand? Trying to touch her, kind of getting real close. And then Rochelle said that Jared leaned over to her and whispered something unexpected in her ear.
I actually was scheduled for both TV and radio, and the first initial interview with him was on my radio program, and within a couple hours it was televised by a local elementary school, and he was very friendly. Yeah. He was very, very nice. And he also apparently was very drawn to me. He was interested in me, was flirtatious. He liked me, and he wanted to get to know me better. You could tell just by the way the conversations were going off camera. And it was pretty straightforward.
Until he said.
Well, it was straightforward as the matter of fact. Yeah. We were sitting on stage. Nobody was in the auditorium yet. It was just he and I. My cameraman was across the way, so the mics were hot. Right. And he had been talking to me, and he leaned over and said to me how hot he thought middle school girls were, which was not even the topic matter. There was nothing that led up to that. And I thought to myself, did he just say what I think he just said, what I just heard? And I looked over at my cameraman across the auditorium, and his jaw, he was floored.
So Jared says some creepy stuff about middle school girls, and Rochelle is like, what the hell's going on? Is this a red flag? Was he just messing around? Is he just like kind of a creep? I don't know, but I got kids and I'm not trying to take my chances. And she really wanted to figure out if this guy was a creep, which I think there's no way to say that you find middle school girls to be hot when you're a grown ass man and not be a creep. Like, definitely a creep, certified creep territory. Now, at that time, in that year, Jared was going through a divorce from his first wife, Elizabeth Christie, who filed for a dissolution of their 5-year marriage and requested a restraining order against the pop culture sandwich guy. Now, according to sources close to the pair, when they were a couple, Elizabeth had been miserable in her marriage to Jared. He'd become controlling. He was known to have a mean streak. Like, they would go to events together. She would leave crying because he was like just a dick. Now, according to court sources, also right around this time, Jared Fogle entered the sexual underworld while in the midst of his divorce, which was happening in 2007. And he did this at first by benignly scrolling through websites that advertised escorts. And he was arranging paid sexual encounters between himself and other consenting adults. So they kind of pose this as like his gateway drug to children, and I don't agree. I really think it's one of those things where he was already just messed up. Like, you don't like just develop this, because this is a mental illness. It's a sickness that you don't just develop and you're not cured from. And I think that Jared always had these proclivities, and I think he just never felt emboldened enough to act on them. And when he met, what's his name, Russell Taylor, it was one of those things where two people meet and they're both deranged and damaged, and they're likely to do a great deal of harm all on their own. But being together, it makes them feel bold. It makes them feel like they have a partner in crime. It makes them feel like their sick desires aren't that sick after all, because how could they be? If somebody else feels the same way, older people must feel this way. It just can't be us, but we're just the only ones who feel comfortable talking about it to each other. But lots of other people have to feel this way. It's not just me. I'm not sick. I'm not damaged. I'm not deranged. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. If you find children to be sexually attractive, you are sick and deranged, and you don't deserve to live. But if you look at it, right, like from a true crime perspective, say, that's the reason, like, Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole were always gallivanting around the country together, killing people and getting off on it. They fed each other. They fed off of each other. Russell Taylor was the Otis Toole to Jared Fogle's Henry Lee Lucas, and together they became something more evil than either of them could have become alone. But let's quickly go back to Rochelle Herman, because she wanted another shot at figuring out what made Jared Fogle tick. And she got that shot 6 months after the first interview, when the American Heart Association asked her if she wanted to interview Jared again. She said yes, and this time she got his phone number so they could start chatting while they were away from each other. And this was Rochelle's chance to get close to Jared, to make him feel like he could trust her and that he could basically open up and talk about his deepest and darkest desires. And this idiot, Jared, spilled it all while Rochelle was recording him. I mean, probably not all of it. Definitely he didn't spill it all, but he spilled enough that, like, what were you thinking? Now, initially, Rochelle started recording him herself without the knowledge or help of any law enforcement agency, but there came a point where Rochelle knew she was in over her head, and she needed the help of law enforcement. Rochelle said that at first Jared talked about kids a lot, but not in a sexual way. He constantly talked about kids. And at one point, Rochelle agreed to meet Jared at his hotel room in West Palm Beach while he was there for work, because she figured he might be more comfortable opening up in person. But as soon as she got there, he basically went in for the kill, right? Like, trying to have sex with her. She said that he put his suitcase on the only chair in the room, so she had no other choice than to sit down on the bed. He sat down next to her, started touching her, started playing with her hair and telling her that she should wear her hair in pigtails, all of that stuff. So she pieced out of there while he was in the bathroom. He went in the bathroom, she ran out, and when he called her and was like, "Where'd you go?" She said, "Oh, I had an emergency with my kids. I had to run. I'm sorry. I feel so bad. I was really looking forward to tonight. Hopefully we can make it up later." Because Rochelle said there was no way she was going to get physical with Jared Fogle, which, yes, absolutely, the thought disgusts me. But after that, Jared was traveling so frequently for Subway that there weren't a lot of opportunities to actually meet in person, which was good for Rochelle, and this gave her a chance to build a long-term relationship with him. But in order to do this, she had to put on a good act, a great act, if you ask me. Rochelle had to pretend to be into Jared. sexually. And she had to pretend to be into what he was into sexually. So just, I mean, pretending to be into Jared sexually in the first place is like an award-winning performance. But yeah, to have to go along with what he was saying he was into sexually, like, I don't know how she did it. And after some time, Jared did relax. He came to trust Rochelle. And when she asked him why he was so attracted to younger people, he said it was because their bodies were so nice and pure. Eventually, Jared became very dependent on Rochelle. He was calling her 15 to 20 times a day, every day. And she had him at this point. She had him, and he did start to open up. But what he had to say was worse than anything any of us could have imagined. He was shameless about it. Rochelle asked him to tell her about his fantasies, and here's the conversation that followed. Okay, so Rochelle asked Jared, what is the craziest thing you want to do? Seriously. And Jared responded, I want to do everything. Rochelle asked him, when you talk about someone who is young, how do we do that? Basically saying, how do we find someone who's young to join us in our sexual, goings-ons? Jared responded, I'll have to figure it out. We can work on that. And Rochelle asked, how young? And Jared said, I don't know. I'd say middle school, whatever. And Rochelle responded, 9 or 10. And Jared said, yeah, that would be hot. That'd be really hot.
You must go crazy with your travels because you get to go into all the different schools and, all the different things like that. I want you to... I'm sure you have a lot of stories. I want you to tell me some of them so that, I don't know, I like to...
Yeah, especially some in the middle school. I love the middle school, and then girls are starting to get,
Yeah.
Because you know how much I love big, I love you.
Mm-hmm. Well,
what's that?
Well, kids are maturing faster nowadays.
I know, which I love. And that's why I think it's wonderful with you is that you're able to get in early. You could totally, win them over, which is what I love.
Mm-hmm. You like that?
I do love that.
Will you tell me how to do that?
Just talk to them, just get to know them, just everything, and just, do a little touchy-feely things with them, and make them feel good. And it's a little more touchy-feely, a little more touchy-feely, a little more touchy-feely. And it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think that would be amazing.
What
totally
age?
Amazing.
What age seems to be the easiest?
I don't know. Early middle school is probably one of the best.
Yeah.
They don't know if they're coming or going.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see a young, 6th, 7th grader, this.
And they'd be all right with that?
What's that?
You have to find out if they'd be all right with that?
Oh, I know they'd definitely be all right with that. They're very much into exploring and, it's just a matter of getting them on your side,
And that's what I'm just curious. I don't know how to do that. Just be friendly to them?
Yeah, just be friendly to them. Just do what you normally would do, baby, because that's what you're so friendly anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can just sort of go from there. We take it, and I think it's all case by case, there's no right way, wrong way, whatever,
Oh my God, my favorite part at the end of that clip, there's no right way or wrong way, whatever, unbelievable. So, let's address a couple of things that he said. It was all disgusting, but most things stuck out to me that he said the best age to target is early middle school. They don't know whether they're coming or going. He's basically saying kids in that age group are going through a lot of changes, right? They're going through a lot of changes emotionally, hormones, mentally. Maybe they've got problems at home. A lot of kids that age are dealing with separated or divorced parents. They're just dealing with trying to figure out who they are in the world. They're dealing with people at school, friends, bullies maybe. They don't know where they're coming or going. So you should take advantage of that. You should take advantage of the fact that they are in a weak and vulnerable mental state and do anything you can to get close to them, right? And he also says, yeah, they're absolutely all right with that. They're into exploring. They're absolutely all right with that. They are not all right with that. You're manipulating them because they're vulnerable. They're children. They're pliable. They're ready to be influenced. And you're making them think that this is what they want maybe, or maybe not even doing that. You're just making them feel that you're the adult, and so they have to kind of follow your lead. They're not all right with that. They're not okay with that, but that is what pedophiles and predators like Jared do. They've convinced themselves that their victims want it, that their victims are asking for it, right? And he says things like this, oh yeah, these girls right around this time are starting to develop. I like breasts and things like that, and they're starting to develop, and they're starting to like really explore their sexuality, and that's when you gotta like strike. He's exploiting their innocence. He's exploiting their vulnerability. It's disgusting. And he says it just like it's nothing. Like it's completely normal and typical and fine to talk that way and feel that way. So these conversations continue and they go on much like this, pretty disgusting. And Rochelle said that at this point she knew she'd gone beyond the point of anything she was prepared to handle on her own. So she went to the FBI office in Sarasota, Florida, and she spoke to an agent Billings, and she shared the details of her conversations with Jared, as well as the recordings she'd made. And Agent Billings was in shock, obviously, and the FBI was like, yeah, this needs to be investigated. But he hasn't committed a crime at this point. It's not illegal to be attracted to children. It's just illegal to act on it. And he hasn't said anything about acting on it, so we can't just go and arrest him. But do you know who they did threaten to arrest? Rochelle, because she had recorded Jared. And Florida is a two-party consent state, which means it's a crime to record someone unless all of the people on the call or in the conversation know they're being recorded, verbally agree to it, et cetera, et cetera. So the FBI was like, we can arrest you and press felony charges, or we can blackmail you and you can go undercover for us and keep recording him legally this time, because as long as the government's doing it, it's okay. So anyways, now Rochelle is an undercover agent for the FBI, and she has to keep going. She has to keep talking to Jared, keep Jared talking, and sort of even up the ante so that the FBI can get some solid evidence that he's actually doing these things, or that he would do them, I guess, if given the chance. But according to Jared himself, he'd already been doing these things. And I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. But first, can we acknowledge what a badass, strong warrior that Rochelle is? Think about how difficult it is at the start of any new relationship to get someone to trust you in general. Think about how for months and sometimes even years, the people you're close to are still holding things back. They still have secrets and they don't feel comfortable sharing that stuff with you at first, if ever. Now imagine that those secrets are the secrets that Jared Fogle kept in his brain that had clearly turned into a Veggie Delight sandwich, all mushy and stupid. How difficult would it be to give a pedophile a sense of security, a feeling that he could share his desires with you, knowing that his desires are not only taboo and disgusting and morally wrong, but legally wrong also? Maybe it's easy. Maybe they're just waiting for somebody to talk to, somebody to confide in, somebody to share their sickness with. Maybe it's easy. I don't know. But I do feel like a public figure such as Jared would have a little bit more reservations when talking about this stuff, because Rochelle could have been recording him. She could have been blackmailing him. I mean, she was a radio DJ. She was a journalist. The fact that he didn't consider she was recording him, I don't understand. But she was good enough to convince him that he could trust her. Rochelle had to become a different person. She had to play the role of a woman who was not only sexually interested in Jared Fogle. Like I said, let's be honest, that role deserves an Academy Award all on its own. But Rochelle also had to behave and act in a genuine way as if she was into what he was into, if you know what I mean, right? The things he was saying, she had to be like, oh yeah, I'm interested. Tell me more. Like, I'm into this. I would do this with you. In order for Rochelle to get him talking about it, she could never show any hint of her disgust. She could never show any flashes of anger or shock. And she had to do all of this while knowing that there were 2 small children of her own sitting in her house, her son and her daughter, waiting for her at home. And there's times that Jared says things to Rochelle, and I don't think I could have done it. I don't think I could have. No. We're going to talk about what he says to her, where I would have absolutely lost it. Like, I would have went Super Saiyan, okay? So now Rochelle's working with the FBI, and she has this strict protocol to follow. And that means basic things, like she has to announce the time and date before each Jared call, and she has to tell what the time is when the call ends, but also some more disruptive things, like any time of the day or night that Jared would call her, she'd have to stop whatever she was doing in her life to take the call and then stay on that call for as long as he wanted, no matter where she was, whether she was at work or at home with her kids, no matter if he was talking about normal day-to-day stuff like work or if he was talking about how into kids he was, she had to stay on that call and listen. And if she was at home with her kids, Rochelle would have to go into a different room so that they couldn't hear what she was talking about. And as soon as she was done with one call and one recording, she had to pack the tapes up and meet an FBI agent for some clandestine back alley drop, even if it was in the middle of the night. Like, it's crazy. But her dedication was paying off because Jared started to get a lot more loose and free with his details. One time, Rochelle asked Jared what was the age of the youngest child he'd ever been with, like physically, if you know what I mean. And he answered 11 or 12. When Rochelle tried to get more details, she was like, oh, do you remember her name? The name of this child? Jared said, I don't remember her name. No, of course not. He's not ready to give that detail yet, right? Jared also suggested that he and Rochelle should get some CSAM so that they could watch it together. And he talked about bringing her with him on a trip to Thailand, a place he had been several times already, and reportedly he'd really enjoyed himself while he was there. For instance, a conversation between Jared and Rochelle went like this. Rochelle asked, what's the most unique experience you've had with someone really young? And Jared answered, I mean, it was definitely Thailand. I'd love you to go with me. We can get whatever age we want. It's just crazy. It's easy over there. Different ages. You just sort of choose who you want. There's a price for it, and then off you go. And Rochelle asked, and you don't get in trouble? And Jared responded, not over there. What a dick. And then Jared told her that when he went to Thailand, he had a special boy there that he would always see, a boy who was 10 or 11, and he described the way that this boy would make him feel in a sexual way when they were together and what the boy would do to him. Yeah, he described this.
Tell me about the best time that you have ever had when you've done that. You know, with whether it's a little girl or a little boy. I want you to explain to me. Can you tell me? Tell me.
It just felt so good. I mean, it felt so good.
How old? Okay.
Like 11, 12, something like that.
Okay.
Little tiny, you know. And it was just, I just started over. I mean, just absolutely, you know, it was wonderful.
You're not having
I mean, I had this little boy. It's amazing.
Really? What makes it different from anyone else?
All this, watching their little it was just amazing.
So this is all wearing on Rochelle, obviously. It's hard for her mental health. She's hiding what she's doing from her family and her kids and her friends. She's sort of living this double life. And she wanted to know why. After all the information she'd gotten, why had Jared not been arrested yet? And the FBI told Rochelle it was because they still didn't have proof. Jared talked about doing this stuff. He claimed he'd do this stuff, but he'd just be making it up. And while his topics of conversation were morally reprehensible, it's not illegal to fantasize about this kind of thing. Although one might say it's a massive red flag, a red flag that isn't going to get any smaller the more Subway sandwiches you feed it. Unlike Jared. But Rochelle was getting really antsy. She just doesn't want to do this anymore. She doesn't want to talk to this guy. She doesn't want to have anything to do with this guy. So the FBI was like, all right, let's try to accelerate things. They decided to set a trap for Jared. Rochelle called Jared and told him that she was planning a birthday party for her young son, and she wanted Jared to attend because there would be lots of, little kids there that he could look at and maybe even get close to, right? Because him and Rochelle had been talking about having a kid joined them in the bedroom for, a while at this point. And the purpose of this plan was to prove that Jared was willing to cross state lines with the intent to engage in sex with a person under the age of 18. So when Rochelle told Jared about the party, he became quite invested in it. And it was all he wanted to talk about after that. And he was full of ideas and plans that he and Rochelle could enact that would basically manipulate these children into feeling comfortable and safe with him and to get them to talk about things with him that were inappropriate, to say the least. So Jared once again gives Rochelle a step-by-step guide on how to groom children at this point. He's like, just, get close to them, be nice to them, make them feel like they can trust you, make them feel like they can open up to you, which is funny because honestly, Jared doesn't have to give Rochelle this step-by-step guide on how to get someone to open up to you and trust you and feel comfortable with you because she was doing it to him at that moment. Irony. Gotta love it. So Rochelle told Jared that her son had a lot of cute friends who were going to be at the party. And she said, these friends at this age, she knew all they were talking about was sex. It was all they discussed at school. And Jared responded, quote, what I need you to do is start talking about that kind of stuff in front of them. Just say, tell Jared what you guys talk about at school. I want to try and watch the kids change and stuff too. We can watch them, end quote. So Jared basically wanted Rochelle to bring up the conversation of sex while he was there. So the kids would start talking about sex and then he would want to find a way to watch them get undressed and into their bathing suit and then like undressed and back into their clothes. He wanted to do that too. And Jared had a specific strategy when it came to choosing children that he wanted to get close to sexually and sexually abuse. He told Rochelle that they needed to focus on the most vulnerable, the kids who didn't have strong support systems at home, who were going through things emotionally and mentally. And Rochelle asked Jared, well, what specific personality are you looking for? And he said, oh, that girl from the broken home could be a possibility. And Rochelle said, yeah, but that girl is 7 though. And what was Jared's response? Tell me about her. So Jared would ask Rochelle for details about her kids' friends, and that's how he came to know that this one girl came from a broken home, or whatever he said, a broken home. Although I'm pretty sure this girl didn't exist, and it was just like a fake child Rochelle made up to like get Jared going. But remember, she said this little girl's 7, and he's like, tell me about her. He doesn't care that she's 7. He doesn't care that she's 7. So this isn't even one of those like creepy guys that's like, interested in like the barely legal girls, which I think is still creepy. Like if you're into like 17, 18-year-old girls and you're like a 45-year-old man, that's weird. But it's not even one of those things. Like he was into 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds. But then during one call, Jared said something so disgusting to Rochelle, something that shook Rochelle to her very core, as it would for any normal parent. Jared asked Rochelle if she would do something for him, and she says yes. And he asked her, would you let me see your kids naked? Rochelle's kids that were 10 and 11 at the time.
What if we put a camera in your kids' room? Would they be okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather have it in your son or your daughter's room?
Oh, I don't know. That would be,
Which one do you think would be better?
I don't know.
Can you tell me?
He even asked her which one of her kids she thought would like him the most and which one she thought he would like the most. And I mean, you can hear in the clip I played for you, he's like, oh, can we put cameras in their rooms? Like, which one do you think? Which one do you think we should do? Like, he's basically asking Rochelle to pick one of her children to be like sacrificed to him. That's what he's asking, right? It's going to start with her showing him naked pictures, her putting cameras in their rooms, and then him getting so interested. And the next thing he's going to want to know is, oh, which one of your kids are we bringing into the bedroom with us? And you may think like, no, that wouldn't happen. That's not going to happen. When you find out more about this, you'll see that that's exactly where he was going with it. And when I tell you I felt physically ill, when I was listening to this. I tend to put myself into people's shoes without even meaning to, without even knowing I'm doing it until I'm like impacted emotionally. And obviously that can be a strength, it can be a great thing, but it can also be a bad thing when something like this happens, because I felt this, man. I felt this as if I was Rochelle. I felt it like a punch to the gut. I wanted to throw up. I had to stop. I had to pause it. I had to get up. I had to take a walk. My heart was racing. I was like feeling that like fight or flight, but it was like fight, like I'm going to kick the shit out of Jared. It's the same way I feel when I'm playing Dead by Daylight, and it's like getting real intense because I always play the killer and it's getting real intense, and these survivors are like evading me and I have to like find them again, and I like my limbs go cold, right? My hands, my feet go cold, my heart's pounding, my mouth goes dry. It's literally like I had this physical and visceral reaction just listening to it. I don't know how Rochelle kept it together. I truly don't. I have to give her a lot of credit because I would have snapped at that point, man. Instinctually and without any control or choice on my part. Okay? I wouldn't have wanted to because I would have wanted to keep like nailing this dude to the wall. But I would have snapped. I would have told that dude, fuck around and find out, man. You're going to lose your goddamn hands before you lay one of them on my children. Fuck around and find out. Okay? So the fake birthday party ended up not happening because Jared's travel plans changed and he couldn't make it, and it was a fake birthday party to begin with, so it just didn't end up happening. And Rochelle at this point was feeling very frustrated and angry and scared because now he was like fixated on her children. And she'd been banking on this birthday party. It was a light at the end of the tunnel, right? It was a suggestion that there was an exit ramp off this crazy highway she'd somehow found herself on. But now the FBI just wanted her to keep talking to Jared, keep recording him. Just keep doing it. Like, how long? Do they want her to do it? Years? Years before she could get something? They're like, just keep doing it and hope that you get something we can use for his arrest. And Rochelle was basically like in the throes of a mental health crisis. She didn't feel like she could do it anymore. And this is completely understandable. Since the expansion of the internet in the mid-90s, law enforcement has encountered a growing number of cases that involve the possession, distribution, and production of CSAM. And in the course of handling a case like this, an agent or a law enforcement official may be exposed to considerable quantities of graphic material that are deeply disturbing. Research from the Cyber Tip Line, which is operated by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, estimates that nearly 1 million CSAM images and videos were being flagged on the internet by law enforcement each month in 2017. 1 million a month, not 1 million over the whole year of 2017, 1 million a month. And if that's not bad enough, that rate has been growing by 51% a year. Someone has to go through these images and videos to flag them. Someone has to go through them to identify the children in them. Someone has to go through them to identify the children's surroundings so they can hopefully find where these kids are being held captive and forced to do these things. And those law enforcement officials struggle with their mental health, and they often end up exhibiting symptoms of traumatic stress. Research has shown that although traumatic stress rates are already higher for law enforcement, average law enforcement agents, crimes involving children are particularly distressing because these investigators have a hard time separating themselves emotionally from the victims. They often think of these child victims as their own children, which is understandable, or they become angry. They become angry at society for failing to protect these innocent children, and I can relate to all of this, obviously on a much smaller level, but still I get it. The not being able to separate emotionally from the victims, seeing your own children when you look at these children who have become victims, and being angry at society and its entities like CPS and the police and, parents for not protecting these children. And usually at the end of the day, you're left with that anger because it's an easier emotion to control and manage than the hurt and the sadness and the depression, and it feels more productive than those other emotions. So you're left with the anger, but that does eat at you. It eats at you, and it makes you an angry person. As the months passed, Jared Fogle went on with his life and his public work as if none of this was happening behind the scenes. He kept traveling as Subway spokesperson. He kept making appearances and doing interviews, and he even found time to get married again in August of 2010 to a woman named Katie McLaughlin, and they went on to have 2 children together, a daughter named Quinn and a son named Brady. Katie was a teacher, but when she married Jared, she stayed home and took care of the kids while Jared traveled around, waving his pants in the air and stalking middle school children. More on Katie later, but let's return to Russell Taylor for a moment. The man that Jared had chosen to head his nonprofit organization, the Jared Foundation, his fake organization. Russell Taylor would be arrested along with his wife Angela, and together they would be hit with multiple and various charges of criminal activity against children, including the production and possession of CSAM, amongst many other charges. Now, these arrests stemmed from a 2014 investigation that was kickstarted when an Indianapolis woman known only as Jane Doe made a call to the police when her friends, the Taylors, Russell and Angela, became inappropriate with her. And I guess what they were doing was they were offering to send her inappropriate pictures and images featuring children, and also discussing horses and sex with her, not separately. They weren't discussing horses and sex separately. They were discussing horses and sex together, if you catch my drift. Now, Jared Fogle would publicly denounce his former friend and employee when Russell was arrested, but it would not be long until Jared's own involvement in the sick and twisted games of the Taylors would also be exposed. And that's where we will pick up next time, when it all falls down for Jared Fogle. Like, it's gonna fall down, man, hard. I can't wait. It's gonna be so sweet. So sweet when we talk about this dude when he gets arrested, and basically what his reasons are for why this happened. How it's not his fault. It is not his fault that he did this. It's not his fault that he did these things. And like I said, it's not just he looked at these things. It's not just that he was in possession of CSAM. He acted on these things. So we're going to talk about that next time. But until then, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. A lot of you are watching, you're not subscribed. Also, hit the like button if you like this video. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter. My tags are in the description box, along with the links to Criminal Coffee, my coffee company that I own with Derek Levasseur, who's also my partner on my podcast, Crime Weekly. We put out new episodes every single week, so you can find those wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, we have a YouTube channel where the episode goes up after it airs with audio. So check out all those links under there. Make sure you stay tuned for this next episode. It shouldn't be long before it's out, only a couple of days. I'm not going to make you wait long. But until then, stay beautiful, stay kind, and stay safe. And I will see you very, very soon. Bye.
killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.